Welcome to another episode. Today we're going to talk about espresso. Not cappuccinos, not macchiatos, not lattes, just straight up espresso, that black liquor that comes from coffee beans. I'm not an expert barista like James Hoffman. Please check out his YouTube channel. In fact, I'm not even a regular barista, but I am a chemical engineer with decades of experience designing things, building things, fabricating things, and breaking even more things. So I think my take on how to make the best espresso and how my understanding of all this science and technology is going to be unique. As with all my videos, I'm going to get straight to the point and give you the goods so you don't have to watch the whole video if you don't want to. The bottom line is, after we're done here, you're going to realize a few things. There are a lot of gadgets, equipment, and techniques out there that you don't need except in very specific circumstances. Next, many baristas out there have no idea what they're doing, or they don't care. I've been to big coffee shops, small coffee shops, and I have to say I've seen some atrocious technique. Even by my amateur eyes, I could tell they were doing it all wrong. And the product I got from them was atrocious. Next, there are ways to cheat to get good, but maybe not the greatest espresso, but certainly very good espresso. And for most people, that is good enough, absolutely good enough. For me, I need the perfect pull every morning, not just for the taste, but there's a sense of accomplishment that comes from it. Next, I'm not a super taster, and 95% of you aren't either. Super tasters are these special human beings that have taste buds that are far beyond, and olfactory senses that are far beyond the average person. They can tell you the year of a vintage of wine, they can tell you every last detail of a taste of anything. You and I cannot. Therefore, we're not going to fuss over little things that make no difference to us. You'll never be able to taste or see the difference between a well-operated $250 machine or a $6,000 machine. I'd say the operator is probably more important than the equipment in this case. And finally, the science is not that complicated, and by the end of this video you're going to have a pretty good understanding of how it all works, and I'll demystify a lot of nonsense out there, the dogma, the wishful thinking, and the conventions that are all over this very unscientific industry. You can see the videos for yourselves, and there's all sorts of voodoo going on, and most of it makes no difference, and a lot of the equipment they use makes no difference, at least to the 95+% of us. Before we get technical, we need to go over the basics of espresso. Feel free to skip ahead if you've heard all this stuff before.
Espresso is made by forcing hot water through compacted coffee grounds. Machines today are nearly always pump-driven. However, there are manual machines, mocha pots, and pod-based systems like Nespresso that also work well enough for many. There is always a trade-off between manual control, convenience, and cost, as you'll see.
So let's talk about the equipment you can get to make your espresso. There's the cheap, there's the medium, and there's the really expensive. And for me, I started with the cheapest machine I could get, and that was on Amazon. There's a dozen or more $120 machines thereabouts that claim to put out 20 bar of pressure, which is a lot, and they're fully manual. So in other words, you have to grind the beans, you tamp it, you put it in the machine, and you brew. Now, for a little extra money, you can get ones even with pressure gauges on them. And I would say for the money, they are an excellent value. So $120 machine, Amazon with a pressure gauge. That's the cheap. Now, the next tier up are the medium ones. Medium price machines that are semi-automatic, like a Breville, which has the grinder and the brewing unit all in one, for instance. DeLonghi and some other ones. They're good, but they basically do the same thing, and they have largely the same hardware inside. Piston pump with pressurized baskets. We'll talk about that a little later. And they do a good job, just like the cheaper ones, but they make it a little easier for you, and they reduce the number of gadgets you need because everything's kind of all in one system. Ninja makes a good value as well, good value machine. And now you're talking several $100, $400 thereabouts, US dollars. And now finally you've got the really expensive lines, which are $1,000+ And these are still manual machines I'm talking about. I'll talk about super automatics in a second. But these manual machines, they are pricey. They are pricey. They got fancier pumps. They have fancier everything, and they will make, I would say, the ultimate espresso. Not that you and I could tell the difference. So you get what you pay for, but at the same time, you're overspending for the most part if you're up in the thousands of dollars. Unless you're a real aficionado, then by all means get the greatest thing you can afford. You'll love it. But for you, me, and everybody else, we can save a lot of money by going with the cheaper machines and just understanding how they work and how to operate them properly. So let's talk about super automatic machines and alternative machines like Nespresso machines that use pods. Super automatics are easy, very easy. So for the amount of effort you put in, i.e. pressing a button, and the quality of coffee, espresso you get out, I give it like a 6 out of 10, 6.5 out of 10. They're pretty good. They're pretty good. I lived with a super automatic for years, a Jura or Jura, depending where you're from, and it made decent enough coffee and decent enough espresso. Plus, you could make every other kind of coffee drink you like with the press of a button. So fantastic. The upfront cost is a little high. It was over $1,000, but it's consistent, delivers what you need each and every time. Now, they use a cheat though, and this cheat goes against kind of proper brewing technique. They use what's called a pressurized basket. And in fact, all the cheaper machines have pressurized baskets. But at least you can swap them out with the cheaper machines. With the super automatic, you can't. It's inside the machine. You're using that pressurized basket whether you like it or not. That pressurized basket, it's a cheat because it gives you the illusion and the appearance of proper brewed espresso, even though your grind or your tamping or whatever might be off. It's very forgiving in that sense. So even if you put way too little coffee or way too coarse coffee or whatever, you'll get something that resembles espresso. And I think for someone who doesn't want to sweat the details and doesn't want to think too hard, pressurized baskets are great. And even if you do want to get like a better tasting espresso, you can still use a pressurized basket if you get the grind and the quantity of beans right. You can still use a pressurized basket to get a good espresso. However, if you're a purist or if you want to do it old school and get an even better espresso, then you need to get rid of the pressurized basket. That means super automatic machines are off the table. I'll tell you what a pressurized basket is, or double-walled basket is another name for it. I'll tell you about that in a second, how they all work when we talk about the science. So if you're a purist, super automatic is not the way to go. If you want the best espresso, super automatic is not the way to go. If you want convenience, fancy, good enough coffee, or you prefer mixed coffees, you prefer cappuccinos and other type of specialty coffees, super automatic's fine. Or if you just don't want to bother doing anything besides pressing a button, super automatic's perfect. But other than that, they may not be certainly they're an expensive option, and they may not be the ideal option for you. They weren't for me. Now the pod machines, the Nespresso is the most famous. The Nespresso Virtuo, the pods of that dome-shaped pod, they claim to be able to make an espresso out of that. They're older capsule style. They also have an espresso pod for that. These products are okay. The pods, the Gen 1 pods, the little sort of trapezoidal shaped or pyramidal shaped pods, made a decent espresso that looked good and tasted decent. But again, there's not enough beans in there, first of all, to really make good espresso, and you're not really getting that pressure drop, that squeeze to get you the crema and the flavor and the aroma that you get in a proper espresso. Same with the Virtuo pods. They create this weird looking crema that just sort of collapses. It looks like the froth at the side of a a river that you see sometimes when they've got biological things growing there, and you see this kind of foam where the water gets all choppy and mixed up. It's this sort of weird looking crema, and it's not really espresso. I mean, it's enjoyable. The quality's good. They're the real masters at creating quality and good tasting coffees, but it's not really espresso. When you try real espresso, it has a punch. It's not as diluted, and it certainly doesn't brew as quickly as their machine. So, if you want to fake it, get those machines. Get a super automatic. Get a Nespresso. Nobody's going to laugh at you. Well, I might, but most people won't laugh at you. They're good enough. But if you want the real experience and you want to look like the boss, learn how to brew it properly. And we're going to tell you how coming up. And I'm going to explain to you about the science, that's going to help you understand it, and that's going to help you understand how to make the best coffee, even with crappy machinery. So let's talk about the science and the physics. That's what makes this whole thing work. You're trying to push hot water through ground coffee, and you want to do it at a certain speed so that your brew time is about 30 seconds. I'm going to give you general numbers. Some people go higher, some people go lower. There's a lot of variability, but the idea is the same. We want a long enough brew time and a high enough pressure drop across those beans. So we're forcing liquid through it hard enough so that we're extracting all the goodies inside those beans, and creating this wonderful textured, delicious and aromatic result, the espresso. So, typical espresso, 30 seconds of brew time, 9 bar of pressure, 9 atmospheres, so 9 times atmospheric pressure of hot water going through this little puck, like a mini hockey puck of beans. And you want to get just the right grind and depth so that 9 bar of pressure, which is a lot, doesn't go through too fast. I want to push it through at just the right speed so that I'm brewing the coffee beans long enough, but not too long, because the flavor gets a little bitter if you overbrew it. So the trick is to get that puck the right shape, the right height, and the right grind. Now, everything changes when you change the kind of beans you're using, the type of roast, the type of varietal, whatever. If you change something about those beans and how you ground them, your formula goes out the window. You got to re-dial in your machine. That's what makes making espresso so hard, and that's why some people just get the super automatic or they use the pods. Things change even during the day as you run that machine, and the humidity goes up and the temperature in the room goes up. Whatever, your puck that ran great in the morning may not run exactly the same later in the day. So we want to dial in our machine. That's the trick. We're going to grind approximately 17 grams of coffee into a fairly fine powder, and then we're going to load that into our basket. The basket is what holds the beans, and that's what the water is going to go through. And you want to tamp those beans so that they're perfectly level. If you don't tamp level and you don't tamp evenly, the water channels. And this is a very common chemical engineering phenomenon in a lot of industrial processes. The water is going to go through the path of least resistance. We want it to go through the whole hockey puck evenly. And tamping is critical. I'll show you the tampers that we've got. There are some manual ones, and then there are these nice self-leveling ones which make sure that you push down straight. Leveling is really handy. I just got my first self-leveling tamper the other day, and I have to say it made a pretty large difference, because when you're tamping and you're just tilted a fraction of a millimeter, that makes a big difference in how the water is flowing through those beans. It's not going to flow through evenly, especially when there's 9 bar of resistance and 9 bar of pressure above the beans. So spending a little bit on some equipment makes a lot of sense, like a good tamper. By a little bit, I mean $15. You're not going to break the bank, but that leveling collar on it is really, really handy. So you tamp the beans. If the water's flowing too fast and you're getting a brew done in 15 seconds, that's too quick. So you need to slow it down with more resistance. That means more coffee, so you have a thicker puck, or finer coffee, or both. I ended up on a certain type of bean I had, which was a medium dark or medium roast. I found that I needed more coffee, and I also needed more a finer grind to maintain that, to get that 30-second brew time. When I used, say, a French roast, which is a very dark roast, I found that I could go with a coarser grind as well as less coffee, and that would create the required resistance to get 30 seconds of brew time, roughly 30 seconds. It's worth talking a little bit about the pumps they use in these machines. In the cheap bean machines, they use what's called a piston pump, or a vibratory pump. It pumps pulses, but very, very fast pulses. And these pulses are so quick that effectively the pressure is more or less constant. They claim 20 bar of pressure, which is higher than the normal 9 bar you need to brew espresso. If you look at the actual pump specs, they're all made in China, which is fine, but they say they actually are spec'd for 19 bar. Now, remember, 19 bar though is the pressure when it's completely deadheaded. In other words, I'm holding back the water. I'm not letting any flow. The pump is just pushing against the brick wall. And it hits its peak pressure at the lowest flow. But we want some flow. So we need some of that water to flow through the beans. And when that flow starts increasing, the pressure is going to go down. The pump cannot maintain 19 bar of pressure at full flow. That's just not the way pumps work. So in fact, at full flow, let's say you have no beans in the basket, there's not going to be any resistance. The water just flows through freely and your pressure is zero. When you have too many beans or too high a pressure in the basket, then the flow is zero and your pressure is 19 bar. So you can kind of draw a graph and draw a line that shows you that exchange between flow rate and pressure. The ideal brew is going to have just enough pressure or just enough flow, which will create that back pressure above the beans. And that back pressure through that bed of beans is what's going to give you the flavor you want and the extraction you want. In the diagram that I'm showing you now, it's that delta P, so change in pressure across those incremental delta P's across that bed that are giving you that extraction. So where does the pressurized basket come into this? Well, the pressurized basket, the only difference is there's an extra piece of resistance at the bottom of the basket. Instead of allowing the coffee to freely flow out of the basket, they constrict it down to this tiny little pinhole, and that pinhole creates pressure in the basket. So it adds another layer of pressure that the pump has to overcome. It's not a terrible thing. It creates this pressure drop, sudden pressure drop in crema when you're running basically any beans at all, or no beans even, or very few beans. It'll create that crema, it'll create that sort of espresso-like look. However, it's a little bit of show and no go. You want to, if you wanted to brew a real espresso and all you had was that pressurized basket with the tiny little opening at the bottom, you still could, nearly. You would just have to load up that basket with enough beans at fine enough grind as if you were running a regular basket, and maybe back it off a little bit. So you would still maintain a decent flow rate. You'll get the delta P across the beans, right? You'll get enough pressure drop across those beans, plus the pressure drop of that tiny little orifice, and overall your pump should be able to carry that water through and get the 30-second brew time you're looking for. Ideally, you wouldn't have that little restriction at the bottom, the orifice, and then you could put a little bit more beans and a little finer grind and get better extraction because you're having a greater delta P across the coffee. But that's okay. If you like the trouble-free aspect and the sort of surefire advantage of this pressurized basket or double-walled basket, go for it. You'll be fine. You may not be able to get that last bit of richness out of the coffee, but because you can't put as much coffee in the basket and you can't put as fine a coffee as you want in the basket. But, you know, it's pretty damn close. And you get crema every time, even if you totally mess it up. I wanted to say a couple of things about the other kind of pump I forgot to mention. It's a vane pump, which is the other type of pump you see in much more expensive espresso machines. Again, the cheap pumps use a little piston pump, which gives you sort of very high frequency choppy pressure. Personally, I think that doesn't matter one lick. It delivers and brews espresso just as good as any other pump. But the more expensive machines use what's called a vane pump, which is, it still pulsates, but a little less so. And it supposedly has superior brewing capability as a result, with better or smoother extraction or some nonsense, who knows. I can't really figure out why it would be better, but the expensive machines use that. It's possible that they're more reliable or they last longer, which may or may not be true, but they certainly cost more money. So it's just important to know that if you're looking at a machine that claims to be high-end, it should have a vane pump. If it's still using that little buzzy piston pump, which just about everything from the mid-market, even some of the high-end, even the Superautomatics use these little piston pumps. You know, it's not truly a high-end machine then. High-end machines have vane pumps, which they sound smoother. They're probably not as annoying sounding, but in the end, in terms of performance, I haven't seen any quantitative or objective results to show that they make better espresso somehow. Okay, now the grind. The grind, so important. It was said, and I have to agree, that spending more on your grinder than you spent on your espresso machine is actually a pretty good idea. You need a good grind. You need proper ground beans, consistently ground, and you want something that weighs it out just right for you, and freshly ground, of course, if you want the best espresso. I mean, yes, you could use pre-ground beans out of a bag, but you're not going to get the richness, you're not going to get the crema, you're not going to get the flavor that you would get if you were running your own grind right before you brewed it. So the grinder I use is a Breville, or in Europe it's called Sage Smart Grinder Pro. It's about $200 US, which is nearly double the price of my espresso machine. And the Breville's probably the lowest you can go before you really before you're in sort of bad territory. So, you know, it's a lot of money for just a coffee grinder, but it's kind of important. Even so, the Breville, I still had to modify it to get me the fineness of grind that I wanted. So that's a little disappointing. I needed to literally take it apart, shim it, and make sure those grinding burrs were close enough together that I could get the finer grind that I needed. So maybe another brand can grind fine enough for you, but this Breville could not, despite its fairly high price. And now, when I say high price, that's all relative, because some grinders are far more expensive, hundreds of dollars more. You'll have to look elsewhere. There are lots of YouTube videos out there where you can find information on what grinders are the best value. But expect to pay $200-300 for a grinder to get you the grind you want. Now, for the puck preparation, I talked about tamping and quantity of beans and everything. Take a look at all these bits of these toys I have, and it's been quite a journey, the learning process. And you can see how the one they give you for free with the espresso machine is kind of a joke. It's flimsy, but it does one thing interestingly well. It lets you make fairly level beds or pucks of ground coffee, because you can use your thumbs to push down the bottom part to level it out. You're really touching the beans as you're as you're making that puck. So that's literally the only good thing about it. The first order of business is get yourself a self-leveling tamper. It will change your life. You can even see a tamper I made myself. I 3D printed it. Thought it was kind of cool. You know, it had a good, nice base on it, good handle on it, so you could put some decent pressure. You know, that was pretty good. That was pretty good. But I did find that I could not make as level a puck as I could with this newer tamper, the self-leveling one. It was hit and miss. So I could see that inconsistency. Now, I'm going to give you some advice that goes way off the reservation. Typically, they say tamp with 35 pounds of force. That's some pretty generic advice, and it's not bad advice. The idea is that at 35 pounds, of course, that would depend on the diameter of your puck, but for most baskets, I mean, 35 pounds gets you that maximum compression. Except that's a lie, because I found that at 35 pounds, 40 pounds, you think your beans are compacted. And I think most of the time that's enough compaction. It's compacted, it'll give you a good brew, that's fine. But for the lighter roasts, I found that extra heavy duty tamping improved my extraction. And it slowed the water down, the flow down, and gave me better extraction. So how did I get that extra push? Well, I basically put my whole body into it. So I put well over 60 pounds of force on that puck. And another thing I did, which is actually really informative, was to actually use my thumbs to push on that puck as hard as I could, and I could feel it give. So I knew there was more compaction possible. There was still lots of air voids in there. So I compacted it even more with my thumbs, and when I did that, I had a very even puck, and it was evenly compacted because I could feel it. You can really feel it with your thumb. You feel what's going on when you're pushing on it, and that even compaction with my thumb got higher density and better extraction, slower flow and better extraction through my beans. So that was a very interesting experiment I did. But you can do the same thing with your tamper. You have to press hell of a hard into it, like with all your weight. So you could be exceeding 60 pounds of pressure. Now, of course, if you're choking your espresso machine, then maybe tamp it less hard, or maybe just don't grind as fine, or maybe put slightly less beans. Or if the opposite's true, if you still can't get enough, if you still can't have too much flow because the pressure is too high with these cheap machines. Remember, you want to brew at 9 bar, not 19 bar, like the cheap machines do. Just tamp the hell out of it. It makes for actually very even pucks that flow very evenly. All right, let me take you through my goodies here. Okay, this is the free spoon you get with the Amazon espresso machines. And it is pretty terrible. It's pretty terrible. But like I said, you can push down on it with your thumbs when you're tamping. And it gives you a very level tamp, at least, if not a great one. Here's my self-leveling tamper. Beautiful stuff. I love it. I love it. It's great. Here's some paper filters I use. And the reason I use these at the bottom of my basket is because it keeps fine grinds out of my coffee. It also prevents the basket holes from blocking, which can happen sometimes. And some baskets actually have very big holes. As you can see the light coming through these ones. Some were so big I found that my coffee grounds were going through. There's also this oil that's present in coffee, which isn't actually very good for you. And the paper filter can absorb that oil and keep it out of your body. You can look up that. You'll have to do your own research on that, but there is a rather unhealthy compound in coffee. It's a minor constituent. Don't worry too much about it, but it's nice to take it out if you can. This is my unpressurized basket. It's got no little orifice on the bottom. It's just got all these little holes. I love it because I can put a whole lot of beans in there. And this is an important modification. This is what I did. I cut out the bottom of my holder so that I could see the bottom of the basket and watch that beautiful coffee come out as it brews. So I'll show you what that looks like. I'll brew a sample in a bit. This is the pressurized basket, one of them, that came with the coffee machine. It only came with pressurized baskets. It looks normal on top, that's fine. On the bottom you get this tiny orifice. In fact, actually I drilled that orifice out. The normal orifice is actually quite a bit smaller. But this is what it looks like. Actually here, this is what it looks like. Very tiny orifice. I think it was in the order of like 30 thousandths of an inch or something. It's just tiny. And the idea is that provides back pressure, even if your beans don't provide enough back pressure. Now, why do I have this basket still? This is for singles. Whenever you brew espresso, you dial it in for double espressos. In other words, 2. To dial it in for a single is impractical because most of the time you're brewing a double. And to dial it into a single with a 20 bar or 19 bar machine like this, you're never going to get enough coffee or fine enough coffee to create that 30-second brew time. The water's going to run through really, really fast, unless, of course, you use a pressurized basket with the restriction on the orifice, on the end here. That's the only way you can slow this down enough. There simply aren't enough beans capable of being put in here to slow the brew time down enough. So you need that orifice if you're just doing a single cup. By single cup, I mean a single espresso, not a single cup. Espressos are typically, rule of thumb is for, say, 20 grams of coffee, make 40 mils of, or 40 grams of espresso. So kind of 2 to 1. It varies, you know, if you like them really short, like a ristretto, then you're gonna, brew maybe for, say, 20 grams of coffee, you're gonna brew maybe 33 or 35 grams of, or milliliters of espresso. So those are the modifications I made. I cut out the bottom of this holder, and initially I cut off the orifice and exposed the bottom of the basket that they gave me. But in the end, I just ended up buying another basket that looks a little prettier, that isn't unpressurized. Now, what's this thing? This is something that you use to distribute the beans. Once they're ground, you distribute them evenly with this little funny wired thing. And initially I thought, maybe that's a good idea. Helps level out the beans. It helps even out any chunks or lumps that you get out of the grinder. I've decided these are gunk. These are junk. These are not needed. They're really kind of useless. I mean, at the end of the day, you're crushing these beans down with such force that any very gently put together lumps you get out of the grinder are not going to make any difference. They're going to get crushed completely and reoriented into that puck. So, that little distribution thing, I mean, it doesn't do anything your thumb couldn't do better. So, spend 2 seconds with your thumb, smooth out the beans, tamp it, you're done. Don't screw around with these stupid things, honestly. And some of them are so elaborate. I mean, yeah, you could use them. They're fun, they're cute, but do you really need them? Like, do you see the guy at Starbucks, the barista at Starbucks using them? No, he's got a life. He's got to get the job done. I mean, if you like the art of it, if you got lots of time on your hands, by all means, do it. Show off to your friends. But realistically, I don't think real baristas use those things. Or if they do, well, then they're getting paid too much. This is my grinder. Again, it's modified inside to grind super fine. I have it on its finest settings basically until to the point where it's nearly choking. And I have a little scale on the bottom. This little drug scale, which is, I don't know, $5 or something. Every drug dealer has one. And I put it underneath so that when my little basket is there and I have a little funnel, this is actually really useful. This is an add-on that's worth the $5. It just helps catch those beans because they're going to overflow otherwise if I don't put that there. I turn my scale on, hit the start button, and off she goes. So here are my 19 grams of beans, and you can see that I can just push it down a little with my thumb. I don't have to fart around with that little distributor thing. I'm gonna need my hands for this in a second, but my funnel helps catch everything inside there. Perfect. Now I got my super awesome tamper, and put her on top. And then I'm gonna push down like a son of a... All right, I got my tamped basket. Now I've got a little distributor screen. Now I hate buying fussy little equipment, but this little steel mesh is gonna soften the droplets that are shooting out of this coffee maker. If I press this button to brew, the shower head, as they call it up top, is dropping hot water down on these beans. I don't want to disturb the puck, and honestly I don't trust this machine to not disturb the puck, so I put this little shower screen in there. They're very cheap, before I brew my coffee. So put the shower screen, or put the steel mesh in there, put it in my machine here. Now you're going to see something interesting. I pre-infuse my beans manually. Here's another shot of a great pull I did with my espresso machine. You can see the exposed basket. So I put just the right amount of water to saturate those beans. You can see me. I give it a few seconds so that soaking the beans sort of stabilizes, infusing and the beans, saturated. So what I do is, and then I hit brew. Infuse for a few seconds, then I turn the machine off or end the brew, and then I let it go a little more just to get the right amount of liquid to saturate the beans. And I wait a second. Few seconds, then I hit the double espresso button and let her rip. And you can see that beautiful flow rate. It's just coming out like a sinew, like a thin stream trickling into the cup. See pretty good even extraction coming from most of the holes, good enough. And you see the crema as well. A little bit extra, like a little bit more. There we go. So that's going to give me about 2 to 1 brewing. So that was about as perfect as it gets. I got my brew time, got my extraction, which tells me I got the right delta P. Delta P is change in pressure across those beans, so that it got me good extraction. And you can see my puck is perfect. Well, that concludes the video. Thanks for watching. There's so much more material I could cover. The grinder modifications I did on my Breville, the espresso machine modifications. I mean, there's so much I can cover. Just let me know in the comments what you want to see next, and I'll see what I can do. Until next time.